Hello, friends and listeners. We are proud to present today's guest, Miss Suzana Delgado Gray. She has earned a bachelor's degree in psychology and criminal justice from Texas Christian University. She has over 20 years of experience providing strategic leadership to various organizations. Since 2010, she has been the Vice President of Operations at the YMCA of Metropolitan Dallas. Miss Delgado Gray, welcome. We are so excited to have you on our show. Let's talk computer science.
Hello, welcome. Thank you for that nice introduction. I'm happy to be here.
Yep, yeah, we need more female role models like you with such an impressive background and the role that you're playing that is super impressive. So can you tell us more about your work and your journey also? How did you get to till this point?
Yes, so you'd mentioned my degree in psychology with a double major in criminal justice. So my career path was really kind of looking into the criminal justice field. And it was my first job out of college that I worked for a nonprofit working with at-risk middle school students. And I fell in love with the families. I fell in love with working for kids in an after school and year round program setting that I decided to kind of go down that path of nonprofit work. And fast forward to 20 plus years, here I am with the YMCA, been here for going on 11 years this summer, and really have enjoyed making an impact in young people's lives. I know many times in my upbringing in the school setting at TCU and even in the workforce, there weren't a lot of people that looked like me. They weren't a lot of Latinas that were working in the nonprofit field. And so I decided early on, I really like this, and being bilingual was an asset to allow me to communicate and reach a different demographic of the families that we were serving in their native language. And so it is when I embarked upon my career and found my passion in working with nonprofit and really being a part of an organization that really had a mission and had a focus of influencing the community, influencing people. And so my role over the years has changed here with the Y. Currently, I'm the executive director also here at the Grand Prairie Family YMCA, so traditional brick and mortar program. But what I love about the Y is that we serve youth all the way up to active older adults. So there's a wide spectrum there of families that we can impact. And part of my role also has kind of moved into the teen world and working with our teen population. So that's essentially 12 years old and up, and managing a team that are experts in teen camp programs in the summer, our Y Achievers program year round, our interesting collaboration with Imagine Science, I'd love to talk more about with you, and our STEM programming. It's one, STEM is one of those words that a couple of years ago was a really sexy word. And it was a word that a lot of people would talk about, but really didn't know much about what STEM was. And I think over the years, as our technology, our exposure, our access has improved, so has the demands and the questions of the youth that we work for and work with to be curious about careers in STEM and what it really means to go into a career, and kind of redefining STEM for middle schoolers who really don't know what it is until you explain it, and then they realize, oh, well, I guess I do want to go into a career of STEM. And so that's kind of been my journey here over the years with the Y, and have really enjoyed the evolution of the work that we do in youth.
Yep, yeah, I mean, you're definitely a role model and you look like you have started working at age 5.
Thank you.
So how did your role change during COVID?
Well, so I think it changed for many organizations in, senior leadership really having to look at how can we really maximize our talent that we have with our staff. We had to unfortunately let a lot of part-time labor go. We had to let go a lot of senior positions. And so with that came a reorganization of our branches and a reorganization of our programs. And so one of the things that we've done is we centralized our programs. And I really like that model of centralization. One, it's more cost effective. And two, you have the content experts of that area working on making improvements in that department. So for example, our sports programs centralized, meaning that there is a group of leaders who are experts in the world of sports programs. And they design our activities, they train and recruit our volunteers, but it still has a local feel to the community. Our aquatics program has centralized. Our school age program was already centralized. We added teen programs to that, and even our health and wellness programs. And it's really kind of taking the content experts in those areas and really designing and developing their programs. Our revenues, what we were looking at projecting in 19 and 2020 were a significant loss in revenue. And so when you have that significant loss in any company, you have to look at the expenses. And so that allowed us to have to be creative in how we looked at our organization structures. So some of those things shifted. The biggest shift, I think, was going virtual. Every company, every business, every organization had to very quickly move to this platform and format. And I remember to this day, 5 years ago, our IT department saying, you can use Teams and you can have virtual meetings, and you don't have to go in person and visit all these places. You can be more effective. And we're just, oh, okay, yes, okay, IT, we'll get there. And then we had to fast forward and get here. And then we were like, okay, so what is this Teams Suites and what is Microsoft? How can I get a camera? And so I have 2 screens, but I don't have a camera. And so it's just little things like that we, what IT was trying to get us as an organization to adopt 5 years ago, we had 5 weeks to kind of.
I know, digital transformation just happened.
Yeah. And the same thing with programs. So a lot of things shifted to, we created a new program with our sports programs, esports. And so we just launched that during COVID and really engaging a lot of youth playing video games. And, these were, how can we create a safe place for kids to compete against each other, have tournaments, have brackets, and be competitive with like-minded youth who at the end of the tournament would have a winner. So we were really surprised to see the interest in our esports, and that's something that's continuing. The interesting thing though, Sandy, is what we're looking at is how can we better cater to our female gamers? Because automatically we were impacting our male gamers, but there was a gap in we weren't seeing a lot of enrollment in our female gamers. And we know they're out there and we know that they're playing against the male counterparts. How can we create? So that's the path we're on now, is understanding that female gamer and how can we address that population and serve their needs on a gaming platform.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I mean, that is very forward thinking. When I think of YMCA, it's so different. So that is very impressive that you guys were able to pull it off in such short notice. I mean, no notice, I guess. Yeah. So can you talk about the Imagine Science program that you have mentioned earlier?
Yes. So about 5 years ago, our national CEOs with the YMCA, Boys and Girls Club of America, National 4-H, and Girls Inc., 4 youth serving organizations, CEOs, came together and said, how can we make a difference in the STEM field? Many of our STEM businesses and organizations were seeing a decrease in the pipeline of people going to college and graduating with STEM careers. And many of the workforce were saying, this is urgent. We need to do something. Otherwise, we won't have pilots. We won't have engineers. We won't have teachers in the classroom teaching mathematics or science. How can we get to the underserved community, because that's where the gap was, and educate them, introduce them to, immerse them in STEM? So 5 years ago, this was a sexy topic. And so we started, when you have 5 national organizations coming together to say, we're willing to set aside our logo and look at what the challenge is. The challenge is the pipeline into STEM careers is running dry. How do we influence that? And so 5 years ago, I was asked to lead that work with the Dallas Y. And as the project manager, it allowed us to work with our neighbor national organizations, whereas before we were working in silos and we were kind of doing our own thing, impacting our own community. And when we removed the ego, we removed the brand, and we started talking about what's important. How are we going to get kids more engaged to know and understand? That's when the magic started happening. And we were getting funding from national YMCA organizations to local. And there were 3 organizations, Omaha, Orange County, and Dallas. And the 3 of us embarked on a journey to make that happen. And so it was really interesting as we went into communities and talked to schools and principals. Here's this concept, Imagine Science. I have my YMCA logo. My counterpart has her Boys and Girls Club logo. 4-H is there and Girls Inc. And they're like, but like, who are you? We're like, we're Imagine Science. And they're like, yeah, but you have different logos and name. Well, yeah, we represent this organization, but we're all coming together. And this was a free program to underserved youth who we saw there was a gap in the STEM field. And what was interesting is when we started STEM programs after school and free to anyone who wanted to come, and after school programs, we had many kids talking about, oh, I don't want to go into a STEM field. I don't want to, be a STEM person. I just want to be a car mechanic. I want to work in my dad's shop and I want to be a mechanic. And we're like, well, that's a STEM field. And they're like, really? So we put a lot of context around what STEM was. So that first year and a half, 2 years, was really defining to them what STEM was, because they didn't have a context to it. And, I remember to this day, there was a little boy, little Latino boy, who was working with circuitry. So it was a unit on circuitry, and they had a battery and wires, and they were trying to get the light bulb to turn on without a switch, without any of that. And he was trying so hard with his power and might to make this light bulb work. Like, you can physically see the energy he was exerting to make this light bulb turn on. And it wasn't until his teacher talked to him about the energy, the flow of energy, the positive and negative, and how really it wasn't about how strong he was, and it wasn't about his might, it was about making the right connections. And when he got that, literally his light bulb went off on, wow, it's not about how strong I can be. Like, I can use my mind and my knowledge of asking questions and discovery and trial and error to make things work. And so that was really interesting to see that. And, seeing girls look at, it was a lesson that they were learning about the circulatory system. and looking at an arm kind of model dissected, and the veins and the nerves and how they all connect to how a hand moves. And it was just fascinating to see these girls learn in a way that has never been presented to them before, that then got them interested in looking at pursuing a career in nursing to learn more about how the body works, or in kinesiology. And it's those moments that with Imagine Science, we're able to do collectively and go in underrepresented youth. And so this summer we expect to serve, so fast forward 6 years now, 1,500 youth in the field of STEM with 15 hours of dosage of STEM programming that Dr. G, I think, Sandy, you've met Dr. G. She heads up our work with Imagine Science for the Dallas Y, but she works collaboratively with the other 3 organizations. And it's, you know, we're going to the Salvation Army, we're going to the city rec centers, we're going to libraries, programs where youth are congregating. We're coming with a STEM focus and career. Just today here in Grand Prairie, the teens had tablets, and they had these little roly ball microbots that they had to program with a different color, and the flashing lights that were coming. And so they had to program how they were moving about, and they had to also then, we're going to play a game of Pictionary using their little microbot. So it was really fun to see them engaged in and being exposed to something different that they don't traditionally get in the school necessarily.
Yep, yeah, that's interesting. I really honestly thought Imagine Science is an external organization until you explained it. It's a combination of these 4 esteemed organizations. That's really cool that you guys pulled it off and you led that. It's probably like, I mean, I don't think it's an easy job to do that.
It's a fun job.
Yep. And also, you're so spot on with the kids wanting to be a car mechanic. It is a STEM job. It is like, if you lately, even more, it is digital STEM job, like Tesla. It's completely electrical and digitized, and all the car companies are right behind it. So even if you want to become a car mechanic, you need to understand some fundamentals of how computers think.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So can you talk to me a little bit about the Y Achievers program?
Yeah, so the YMCA Achievers program started years ago with the African American community. And it was really working and focusing on our African American youth and how disproportionately they weren't going to college, and they weren't thinking post high school of what their career paths were. So several prominent African American leaders in our communities and nationwide movement came together to focus on a program that was really focused towards that community, and how do we engage them in post high school education and get them excited to attend college. And so then that kind of expanded into, well, there's also the Latino population also is, you know, somewhat disenfranchised in that they're not pursuing college degrees at the rate of their Anglo counterparts. And so how do we address that? And so then the Achievers program, where it was primarily originated with the African American community, then expanded to not have a race, because over time we started realizing that, you know, there were our Anglo counterparts too. It's about socioeconomics. It's about how you are raised, and if you even have that model of a parent or a sibling that also went to college. I was the first and only in my family of 5 to go on to college and graduate and get a degree. And so, you know, it's a little less, you know, more and more people of color are going into colleges and graduating and, you know, getting post-secondary degrees and masters and PhDs. And so the Y Achievers program was really working with predominantly large minority groups in their school districts and working with high school advisors and middle school advisors that would teach the what we called at the time 6 to 16 curriculum. Is how do you get someone from 6 to 16 years old, how do you give them the skills that maybe they're not getting in their classroom? So it's teaching them how to manage a checkbook, it's talking to them about careers, it's talking about college application. So a lot of programs at schools now that are AVID programs or CTE, college readiness courses, that a lot of high schools have now been accredited to be a STEM high school or a mechanical engineering, or you can have a cosmetology certification, or you can be an EMT certified when you graduate high school. Many of the high schools have created those degree plans for high school and work with them on not just what's specific to that trade that they want to pursue after high school, but how do we give them the skills on how to write a good essay? How do we give them the skills to apply to college? This last summer, not last summer, in the fall, we took about 60 of our Y achievers on virtual tours to 5 colleges and had college admissions representatives talk about careers, talk about college life. And it was really great to see them be transported into another campus. And so many campuses have now gone virtual in their orientations, in digitally looking at their dorm that they're going to be staying in the fall. And so with the Y Achievers programs, it's minimizing the gap between how do we get our high school students of color in particularly interested in pursuing college. And because we know that's important. We know that having a college degree will open up doors for them in ways, and also gets them thinking in a different way, or ask more questions, or consider things that maybe they hadn't considered otherwise. And so I love the Achievers program right now. Our biggest program is at Duncanville High School here in Dallas. I think in the fall, we have about 500 kids that will be enrolled in that program. DeSoto ISD is another one that just had gained interest. Irving ISD, several charter schools. So we have the curriculum, we have the content, we have I guess you would call it the rubric of all the different classes and the dosage and the experience. We need the teachers who then become our advisors to deliver the curriculum to the kids during their class period or their advisory period during the school, or they can have it in an after school format. Or we've adjusted it to it where it can be a Saturday program, all to how the school district and the school wants to cater the Y Achievers program. And it's at no cost to the school district, and it's at no cost to the kids. Because the Y raises money with our annual campaign, this is one of our causes of what we raise thousands of dollars for, to make this at no cost and removing that barrier for schools who want to partner with us.
Yep. Yeah, I can imagine. Like, I'm sure there's so many kids being impacted with this, and probably they change their mind on college, not thinking about it to thinking about it, or maybe even attending and finishing it, right? So can you also touch on the Teens Camp program that and also the STEM?
Yeah, so we're at 4 different branches in the Dallas Metroplex: Oak Cliff, Moreland, Park South, Plano, and the Grand Prairie YMCA. And so we're serving teens 12 years old up to about 16 years old. And we are just infusing in those 9 weeks of camp. It's an all-day camp, so from 7 in the morning till about 5:30. We have guest speakers who come and talk to the kids about career readiness. And we have different vendors that also come in and do STEM programming with the kids. Dr. G is very knowledgeable in her field and experience of STEM. And so she does a lot of programming with the kids as well. So we have someone who's doing cinematography, photography, so is always walking around with a camera. Then they'll work on the editing of kind of putting that together. We have our microbots, we have cooking, we're putting together a garden here at the Y, and they're creating garden bots that will be designed to measure the soil, the temperature, the sun exposure to that part of the garden. So it lets us as their or them as the gardeners know how much water they need. Does it need fertilizer? What's the temperature of that garden? And so it's kind of taking gardening digitally and providing feedback to the students so they know how they need to adjust to allow for the plants and the flowers to grow. And the idea is for then during the year, volunteers and our active older adults to maintain those gardens when the kids go back to school. So teen camp is also something that's, popular, and you got to have phone time. So we definitely in the schedule break out and carve out, an hour for them to check their social media, play their games. So it's interesting to hear them even talk about, their gaming devices at home, whether they are a computer, a Xbox, or if they're a Nintendo Switch. And so they share a lot of skills with each other. And so what we try to do is guide that conversation and make sure that the conversations they're having are not about misconceptions, because we're in a world where teens are going online to get their facts and get their data. If you don't have an adult who is then questioning that or is having them make sure that their source is reliable, then they can just have a false sense of what reality is in some aspects. And so it's talking to them, it's being a role model to these teens. We have about 25 teens here, which is pretty good for a teen camp to get 25 teens. Yeah. Because kids could be at home, but they're here and they're engaged and they keep coming back. We're in 2 weeks. So we're doing something right. I think they are.
Yep, that's awesome. I really love all the programs that you offer and the number of people that you're impacting. Thank you so much, Suzana, for being on our show and explaining your programs and doing what you're doing even during COVID. Thank you so much for your time today.
You're welcome. Thank you, Sandy. It was a pleasure.